Hey everyone, Pete here again, and want to do another tutorial video for you all. Um, Here, I'm kind of starting out here in one of my maps that I've been working on that I think I'm going to turn into the Dualtacular contest. So I thought I'd showcase this a little bit as we do a tutorial. Um, what I want to talk about today is some of the very basics of scripting in general, and that's variables and essentially using variables to store information that doesn't currently exist in the game. So we're gonna kind of get into that. We'll give a few examples of how they work and what sort of things we can store here. Um, and yeah, I mainly just wanted to kind of give everyone a really basic head start on how to use variables in the game. I know that some of the people viewing my videos, it's their first time doing anything with scripting, and so I want to make sure we have the information for everyone. If you already know stuff about variables, that's great. This video may not be for you, but maybe you'll learn something. Who knows? So let's go ahead and jump into our graph here. You know what? Let's make a new graph. So coming in here into gameplay, scripting, and we'll grab a script brain. And we go into the node graph. So here's our canvas we're going to start on. Here in the object, oh, click the wrong thing. Here in the node browser, we have a bunch of sections. There's two sections specific to variables. So we're going to talk about stuff in both of these. Variables basic is some of the basic information. So it kind of defines what types of variables are available here in Forge. Um, Area monitor, that's essentially storing information about what's coming and going out of a boundary area. Boolean is storing true and false values. Equipment type stores literally that, the type of the equipment. Grenade type, types of grenades. Identifier is something that you can type in yourself to store information, but this is mainly used to store anything that you need to name. So, like when you're declaring a variable, which we'll get to, you have to name it something. When you're doing a custom event, you have to name it something. So, those names that are unique to what you're building are what the identifiers are used for. Numbers, that's obvious. Storing a number, object list, object reference. It's fairly basic. Storing text as a string, which I actually haven't really used this one. I don't know. Maybe we'll have to look into that and come back to it. But you can store like what team players are on. Vector 3, which is it's for three-dimensional stuff. You know, it's the X and Y axis, and then the Z, which is the up and down in Halo. Type, you can store types of vehicles, types of weapons, and then you can use the weapon type combination, which is really cool. I have a separate video that I showed where I made a combination weapon randomizer. So I used a lot of that in that. So first off, though, I wanted to quickly talk about um, the idea of a variable is it's probably like if you don't have any sort of programming experience, it's probably not something you even know what it means, what it is. So the best way to think about it is a variable is a way for us to store something in the computer's memory and be able to access it whenever we need to. So for example, um, let's say we have a number 10 that we need for something in our event or function in programming. The computer doesn't have any way of knowing that we need a number 10 unless we tell it that. So here in the scripting, let's go back into the menu here. These basic variables, okay, so like a number, we can just plug it in, we can type in the number we want, 52, boom. Now we have the number 52 that we can use to manipulate. We can do some math with it. Like there's a whole section here. Let's grab another number variable. Let's go in here to our math section. We'll get a multiply. Okay. Let's just do 10. So if we want to multiply 10 by 52, that's going to be 520, right? So the computer doesn't know that unless we tell it that we want it to do all this. Let's do a quick demonstration. Print number to kill feed. And we'll do our event to be on player crouch. It's a simple one. So right here we got this multiplication going on. Our numbers, we're storing 52, we're storing 10. Those didn't exist in the game before. And when we crouch, it's going to multiply it for us. So let's go ahead and run it. Debug says 520. And every time I crouch or uncrouch, it gives us that 520. So there's basic storing, like you don't have to do anything special to get this number variable. Like 343 developed Forge to go ahead and store that for you. Most of these, like so area monitors aren't, you can't, but like a Boolean, you can just come in here and store false or true, okay? So we'll store a true there. Equipment type, let's say we want to store an active camo. So some of these will have drop downs, some of them will have various different things. We can do an identifier. So we'll say we're gonna use this in a minute. We'll just call it number. Okay. So I'm storing this unique identifier called number. I'll show you how we can use that here in a second. Object lists. So you can have a list. I believe they're up to 120 objects. However, they, for whatever reason, decided lists would be 4 objects for these variables. So you can plug 4 objects into that object reference. So we don't have this referencing anything yet, but we can plug that right into our object list. We could add a bunch of empty references. The object reference is cool because you can store dynamic objects. So I'm going to give you a quick example here. We have underneath the map, apologize for the jarring movement here. I've got these blocks that I use for my bridge here in the middle. It's a dynamic object, so if I highlight that, once it's highlighted, I'm in my node graph, I can actually go into the folder section, that's what it's called. See how it's already selected right here? If I just click on it, now I have a reference to that crate in my object list. So we're storing that information. We're telling the game we want to know that this crate, we want to access this crate's information when we want it, so we have a node storing that. So there's lots and lots of things that you can store. Team, like for example, this is super helpful if you're doing any sort of scripted game types and you have to manage, what team's getting what statuses, things like that. You can store the Cobra team here. And you know, there's lots of things we can do with these. Like for example, storing the Cobra team. Let's say we wanted to do some logic where we got all the players on a specific team. Okay. Well, I can just plug that in right there. Well, is that really necessary? Well, for one thing, no, because we could just enter that information in on this node specifically. It's like it has a built-in variable. However, let's say we needed to get the players on team 8 times. Instead of going in and manually changing it 8 times, we could just drag this line to all the different, nodes. So kind of cool how you can do that. Now, what I kind of wanted to talk about next is let's talk about the advanced variables, okay? So what you're going to see in this menu is you're going to see 3 things: declare, get, and set. And want to talk for a minute about those 3 things. And while we do that, our script is broken, but so with the declaring is basically we're saying we want to store. It's almost like a variable of a variable. It's kind of a way you can think about it. We're storing so declaration is at the beginning of the game. We are storing information for a specific thing. And actually, let me go into the menu here. Let's make one. So let's pick number, and you'll see that these correspond to pretty much every one of the variables we just looked at on the other menu. You've got a declare, a get, and a set version of those things. So let's do our number because we've already got our identifier set up. Let's say we want to declare a number variable. So at the beginning of the game starts, I'm saying I have a certain value declared. The other thing about this is you don't always have to store a value. Like you might even store 0 or nothing in some of these when you declare them, but this is a container. We want to be able to put information in there and keep it for later when we need it in our script. And so that's what the declaration allows us to do. If you don't declare a variable, you can't use a get or a set, which we'll talk about in a second. But you can plug in an identifier just by going in to the declaration node. You can also drag your identifier that's separate in. I tend to not use this identifier all that often, but just wanted to kind of use it as an example. Now this identifier is number. Initial value, let's start it out at 10. Why not? And then the scope, we've talked about scope in some of my other videos. Hopefully if you're watching this, you know a little bit about scope, but because we're only going to be working in this single node brain for the tutorial today, I'm going to set it to local, which just means it's not going to impact anything in other brains that I have on the map. It's all going to stay within the constraints of this brain. So now we've declared the number 10. That's something we have stored. How do we access it? Well, that's where you get to that's where you come to the getters and setters. If we want to access the number 10, we have to use a get because you're going into that container and getting what it contains. That's why it's called a get. So we would use like a get number variable. And let's kind of modify this here. We're going to get rid of our number right here. Okay, so we still have our 52, but we want to do the same thing, and our number up here is 10 that it starts as. So we're going to get what we declared up here. the cool thing about this is when you're getting this, you can get it as many times as you need throughout your script. Sometimes it's not as simple as the number 10 that you're storing. Maybe it's like some random number you calculated. Um, that number is being stored in there. You literally, as the person making the script, you don't even know that number. A lot of the time, it depends on what's going on in the game. So you can store that number and then you can get it later, which is super helpful for scripting. So here we can either type in the identifier, which I'm going to do that. We'll just type number. And then scope, we need to be the same scope as our other one, so we're going to go local. And then this object is only for if you're using object scope, so you can ignore it for right now. Like I said, I have another video that talks about the different scopes. I would recommend checking that out if you want to know more about how those other scopes can be used. But so now with what we've got, let's see, this says get all players on team. Let's delete that so we don't get a error in our log. So right now, like we can kind of ignore all these for now. We declared the number variable as 10. We're accessing that using the get number variable, and we're printing that out. So we should see the ability to crouch and get our 520 again. All right, so let's take it a little bit step further because I want to just kind of drive home how cool this is, okay? Well, you know what? Let's do our set. So right here, set number variable. Okay. We're going to actually create a separate event, and I'm sorry this is getting kind of messy. Let's move over here a little bit where we have some room. Let's go up to our player events. We're going to do on player mark. So once we mark, it's going to trigger this, and we're going to set the number variable, and we're going to set it to a certain value. So I'm going to just drag this number over so I don't have to type it in. Scope is going to be local. And our value, okay? So keep in mind, we're storing 10 from the get-go here. What if we do some math and we show you how it can kind of change over time? So let's go to our math section and let's go ahead and we'll use an add node. We're going to plug the result into the value. So what we're going to be doing here is we're going to calculate using addition, and it's going to store the value of what we calculated back into this declaration variable. So here's what we can do. We can do the result of our multiplication over here. So keep in mind, normally you don't crisscross different events and things, but these nodes like the multiplies, the variables themselves, those can be accessed across different events because it's really just like a way to locate or access the storage. So we're going to add what is currently in the number variable. So it's right now it starts out as 10. We're going to add it to whatever the result of this multiplication is when we mark, and we're storing it in the declaration variable. So this is probably a little confusing, but let's let's test it out essentially. So initially, when we crouch, it's going to multiply these together and send it to the kill feed. So we're going to see 520, but then if we do a mark, it's going to store 520 added to 10, so it'll be 530 the next time, or sorry, it'll be 530 that we're multiplying next time. So it's going to get complicated, but you'll see how this all kind of works. So let's run it. So first off, let's go ahead and mark. Okay, so we just stored a bigger number, and then if we crouch, so we just probably did 530 times 52 or something along those lines. See how it was like a giant number? If we keep crouching, it's going to be just that same number, but if we mark again, now we updated what's being stored using that set variable. So now it's like a much bigger number. And if we do it again, it's an even bigger number. See how so we're setting it over and over and over. Now we just got into negatives. That's kind of weird. But I don't know enough about all the math going on to know why it showed up a negative. If we want to change this though, let's say we don't want it to multiply by 52 every time, we just want it to multiply by 2. Okay, we can change what's in that variable. And now let's crouch. There's 20 in there. Multiply it. Now we got 60, 180. Anyway, so what it's doing is it's adding itself to the multiplication and storing that. But anyway, so that's kind of a quick demo on how some of the different variables work. Wanted to talk really quick about area monitor variables. So I already have this bridge set up. I kind of showed you. We have all these crates underneath the map that are what pop up when you walk into the area monitor. So right now I was kind of working on this, so it's not fully finished because apparently this light thing that I was trying won't show up in customs, so I'm probably gonna have to change this up. But I have an area monitor right in this little square area. When I walk into it, it's detecting that someone entered that boundary and it's doing something. So this is our little boundary I'm talking about. I'm a player, I'm walking into that boundary. It's detecting that I entered, storing everything that's in that boundary, and you're able to then access it with different nodes. So it's not one where you necessarily set yourself what's in that variable, but you're able to access all the different things in the variable. So what I want to show you real quick is my brain up here. I think it's this one. Yes, this is what we want. So there's a lot going on here, but I want to show you. We have a crate, or sorry, we have a pointer that I've set a boundary to. So just the same as the one that we were just looking at. We also have got a rogue object reference that we don't need there. The area monitor is storing whatever's inside that. Anytime it changes, it's going to trigger if something's going into it, it'll trigger this event. If something's leaving it, it'll trigger this event, this event. And then I also have this node, which at different points in time will actually just check whatever's inside that monitor. So if you look, this is in the door close event. I'm passing the list of things in the monitor into this object list right here, and it comes all the way over here, and it hooks to this for each player. So what I'm doing is I'm saying, at this point in my script, check whatever's inside the area monitor, and for every player, set this Boolean to true. It's the way I made to basically check, is there a player in that monitor? If there's not, I go ahead and change it to not occupied in my script. If there is, I don't do anything because there's still a player in that, and I don't want to change anything if there's a player in the boundary. The whole purpose of that is for this little bridge thing that I made. It's kind of hard to see unless I look down. It kind of just follows you. I don't want this to stop working if another player gets in here and is is up on the bridges. So that's the whole purpose of the area monitors. So I think we've gone a little longer than I had anticipated, but I hope that you all have a lot better understanding of the variables and what their use is. It having access to the variables opens up all sorts of new things for scripting. So I'll leave it there. If you watched this far, obviously thank you. Thanks for the support, everyone. I love doing this because I want to make sure you all have information that you need in order to be better at scripting and learn new things and kind of have fun with Forge. So thank you. And as always, have a wonderful day.